But when you're on the
Swedish
block,
is bad.
so on chain, you're not using euro stable coins
No,
like J
no.
Euro or like what is it like
You use the big
AG
ones.
Euro, I think.
The bigger, the better.
Yeah, like what is it?
Yeah, like
USDC,
Feather,
USDP, DAI.
BUSD, used. Yeah, all the
Yeah,
fun ones.
It's funny
yeah,
for being so heavily involved in the crypto space and running so many chains. I don't really do, I mean, if I have coins, I have coins to keep the coins. I'm not really flipping them to stable. If they're coming out of a coin, I mean, I'm spending them. I mean, that's where we get our revenue to come out, not so much where we're putting revenue to go back in. So people ask me all the time, and I'm like, I don't really go in that much. I'm here and I play, but it's more. I don't go to stable. I mean, if I'm getting out of the coin, I'm just getting out.
yeah, yeah. I guess I like the stablecoin like ecosystem more for like supplying liquidity versus like holding stable coins.
Totally
Max
makes
loves
sense.
DeFi.
Yeah, I use it
I'm
for
just
trading
not
as
that
well.
guy.
Yeah. Yeah, like there's some crazy pools right now, like for like euro and US dollar stablecoin pairs, so relatively low like volatility as far as price action goes. But god damn, these protocols pay you out the nose for liquidity in those assets.
That's all I was saying. As long as you get it, I was telling somebody else earlier. I was like, if you get it at the right time in the right place, it's great. But I mean, it's all still just a money game that everybody's playing. So, and
Yeah.
that's like I say, I'm always the giver on those deals. I know I'm not. I don't see the doggies in the clouds and know the patterns and the Fibonacci lines and all of that. I'm the guy that you're wrecking when you know that the market's going to crash. So, you know what? I don't play that ball game.
Hey, yeah, I guess to each their own, right? And that's the cool part about the whole like crypto economy is that it isn't like you participate in it in a pretty like significant way by in supporting the infrastructure that people like me who do the DeFi shit rely on. But you don't have to even be aware of the DeFi shit that I'm doing.
I
Really.
personally don't. Luckily, one of my business partners is the financial guy, the CFO trader. So he's the one that's watching all the charts and telling me the doom and gloom and all of that. So we still have to do that. I mean, we make coins to then have to sell them to be able to pay the bills. But
Yeah.
I luckily am not the guy because I would take a loss on everything. At least he gets them, and then he gets the most out of it that he can.
Yeah, it definitely is not for everyone, and I feel like it is so accessible when it comes to crypto that everybody feels like they can all like get into it, but they probably shouldn't.
Oh, you're a
Like you
numbers
said.
guy. Why don't you get into it? I'm
Yeah.
like, because I know I stay in my lane. I know
Yeah.
Bash and Linux, not Fibonacci
Not
and C waves.
solidity. Yeah. No,
It's not that hard. You just
that
need to buy when it's low and sell when it's high. It's a simple concept.
I've gotten that concept exactly backwards all of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, don't tip him off to my strategy, dude. You're blowing up my spot
He
here.
needs
Buy
me
low, sell high. Is what I'm
to
doing.
be the sucker to buy it high and sell it low. So.
And Nick is in the chat, I see.
Oh, what's going on?
He's here to banter with us.
Probably.
Doesn't he have somebody's site to go pwn and send him a love note? Take your shit down now.
Nice. Let me see. How's Wax doing right now? Wax was doing a nice little pump yesterday, but
yeah,
nothing unexpected. Honestly, it's still within the trading range we were looking at last week.
Maybe I don't even pay attention.
Plus, it's the election.
Yeah.
Right. The OG elections. We were actually saying that they can tend to cause a little pump as people like try to buy some voting rights.
I feel like I wouldn't expect too much of it this time just because it's such a landslide right now, but you never know.
Yeah.
Yeah, last time a few million moved the last day.
Yeah. Yeah, let's see. It is definitely, I mean, Kafer is definitely winning this, I feel like.
There might still be some big accounts out there that could vote. I don't think, like you say, I don't think they'll make a difference, but I think there's some big accounts that are out there.
Yeah. Oh, nice spike. 5.5. Back at 5 now, though.
He's got a pretty demanding lead here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I mean, I got to be honest. He's, I mean, pretty decent guy for what he does. He's done it for a while and has helped advance it. So kind of makes sense.
But
Yeah, we spoke with him on Friday, and it seems like he is absolutely qualified to be that that position.
there's
I
just
remember
7
whenever
voters
we
over
were,
1 million, though.
what'd you say?
Yeah, we have 7 voters over 1 million votes.
All right.
Only 1 million? That's weak.
And multiple of them are
Last
bounty
time it
bots.
was 13, so 2 times as many that held over 1 million.
Look, noticeable accounts too.
Yeah.
They aren't WAM accounts. Let's put it that way.
I feel like
Yeah.
now that I'm like more involved in the guild world, after seeing all the intricacies of it and whatnot, I'm realizing like how much time somebody would have to spend in this space doing this stuff before they're qualified to be an IG. Because like, even if you
Yeah.
have the technical knowledge and stuff and you understand wax, there are just like so many different contracts and all these different things involved where you have to like know the code to all of them in and out to like even be able to participate in deciding anything going forward.
Yeah, it's more and more
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Like even
That's what I love.
sorry, go ahead.
That's what I loved hearing from Kafer, like his perspective of like, you know, being part of Wax's like trajectory since like the pre-sale on Ethereum, and then like participating the entire time gives him that like perspective that is like kind of uniquely qualifies him in a way nobody else is qualified.
Specialized knowledge, that's what they talk about in all those books.
Yeah.
What
Yeah,
books? I
it's-
don't read.
I don't know. So I think what's his name? Think and Grow Rich and those books. What's that guy's name again?
Oh.
I don't know. I don't read them.
It's not
I
coming.
know which book you mean, though.
Napoleon Hill.
I think I have the audiobook of that.
Yeah, me too.
I didn't realize how
Yeah.
early Kafer was to Wax until we interviewed him. He's like,
Yeah.
he's been around since like the beginning, basically.
Yeah, the
man.
beginning. I mean, I remember whenever we were all begging him, it's like, look, there is nobody else that should be an OIG. Please run. Yeah, I don't want to run. Please run.
Yeah.
I think he was
Yeah.
the first elected after the initial crew, wasn't he? So it was Detroit,
Yeah.
Joseph, Barcelona,
Yeah, the
and
first election he won.
then he was
Yeah,
the
he was
first
the
one to
very first
replace him,
elected
yeah.
OIG.
Oh,
Which
60
was
million
also-
votes.
Marlon was the third one. That's who it was. And now I remember
Yeah.
why he disappeared out of my mind.
He disappeared
Yeah.
out of every place.
Correct. That's what you saw what I did there, right? That's what. So anyway, but yeah, so those were 3 guilds that ultimately originally kind of formed or were tapped to form it. And
Yeah,
then,
but it kind of
Kafer-
had to be that because they needed the insight to even get the foundation of how
Correct.
to look at things and review things and
understand
Yeah.
how dumpster fire a node really is. And it's come a long way since then.
yeah, because there was a lot of foundational things that was missing in the start.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't
Yeah.
even have a NFT marketplace. We didn't. I think it was 10 months until Atomic Asset released after launch.
Yeah. Those
So
simple assets
before that, we had simple assets. Yeah, might even been more. Oh, I wonder if it was 1 year, one and a half year. I don't remember. Time goes so fast.
It does.
I don't know. I just remember waiting forever for mainnet to launch. Because remember, it was kind of a closed knit launch community, and it was like, hey, come on, let me in.
Yeah, it wasn't it like multiple years after the ICO on ETH that before mainnet actually launched? It wasn't like 2
Yeah.
years or something later. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Damn.
want to
And,
say
and testnet launched after.
Oh, that's
Which is
right.
funny.
It was right. Y'all launched testnet after. I guess mainnet became what we launched in 19.
They had internal testnet, so it wasn't like, oh, let's launch this and see what happens. But
you
the
sure?
public one.
That's almost what it sounded like.
Yeah. Well, we launched
Damn.
it, I think, in October or November, I think. And Shane got live in July. So it
Damn.
was a few months.
Well, between the pre-sale and the mainnet launch, was there much to do aside from, I guess, the Genesis staking is like what most people are doing, right? You just had to like lock your stuff for 3 years or something like that.
That
Claiming your
was on
tokens.
mainnet. The Genesis
Oh, that
staking was
when
when
mainnet
mainnet launched.
Yeah.
Oh shit! So what was going on before, like between ICO and mainnet launch? Just
I was
waiting?
not deeply involved in the community until mainnet launched. I was just
okay.
I was holding a few tokens, standing on the sidelines. But when mainnet launched, since then I've been in here more than I should probably.
Oh yeah. So when you were there then at the beginning of the launch, what does it take to build, like to run a node? If you're just gonna support for Wax, like if you're not doing anything else, if you're just running like a node, what is
Now
like,
or at the beginning?
I guess
This is very
I'm more
different.
interested. Yeah. Okay. So what does it take now? Is what I'm curious about.
Now you kinda you can't get away with less, but you kinda need around 4 gigahertz CPU with 128 gigs of RAM.
Damn.
That's pretty much the basic. You can get away with less if you do some shenanigans and trick your computer that it has more RAM than it has through some temp file systems and things like that.
There's some Amsterdam magic.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
What I will say also, it's important to know is it really needs to be bare metal. Is that, I mean, obviously you're talking about those specs. You can't really get VMs that are that big that often, but you can't be in like that multi-tenant environment very well, because when your clock cycles get robbed for your other tenant, it just crushes your your speed. So
you need a dedicated CPU and you need
bare
dedicated
metal,
RAM and dedicated drive. You can get that in cloud, but it will be very expensive. So you want to have a dedicated machine, and there are a bunch of folks that offer that. Or we run our own nodes, and Michael run his own nodes. So we are some of the few that run our own hardware.
So that's an interesting caveat, that there are some of us that a lot of the operations co-locate, rent their servers, nice, powerful servers in big, beautiful data centers, but they carry obviously a larger OpEx, and I've had a few host servers in the cloud that I couldn't get access to, right? I mean, it died and nobody there cared. And so there are some of us and some of the, heavier infrastructure providers, because us scaling isn't nearly as costly, to where I can throw, a wall of 50 i9 servers up with, petabytes of NVMe storage, and not have to spend $10,000 a month on all these servers. So there's different strategies.
Yeah, so ongoing costs are less, but initial investment is higher.
And I capitalized it, so I mean, you do your different strategies, but there's multiple ways of kind of addressing that you can either rent them, which is, I think, what most people tend to do that, because you don't run it out of your garage and it gives you a nice balancing cost. But then there's those of us that, may be able to get by for less overhead, because I run a, mining facility that has redundant fiber internet and 60 kilowatt generators.
The hardware itself, though, doesn't need to have a redundancy built somewhere on a separate location to run. Or it does.
We have 3 physical locations around the area where we live, and then we have some backups in Hetchner in case shit hits the fan.
And you keep these types of CPUs, like processors, need to be at each one of these 3 locations. So you need 3 times this. Oh, damn. Okay, yeah. So startup cost isn't trivial.
Startup cost doesn't mean that you need 4 locations.
If you're capitalizing, now you see why renting them in the cloud and throwing them in Canada and whatnot.
One positive thing about renting machines is that you can just add another one, and it's just a click with your button and wait a few hours, and then you have a new machine. Then one of the negative sides that I've noticed with Hetchner or our team has is that sometimes we call it the hardware lottery. Sometimes you get drives that are really bad. Sometimes you get motherboards that are bad, and the process to change that is horrible. You can't really select which hardware you get. You can kind of like, okay, I want this much NVMe drives, and then you get whatever brand they have.
Yeah, gotcha.
Eligibility for getting paid every month and getting scored is based on uptime. That's like a lot of the criteria. So you don't just need to have a backup node somewhere. You need to have one that's actually running like simultaneously with your existing node, because if you have a problem with the one that's on the mainnet producing, you need to be able to unregister that and then register the other one to take its place like instantly, or else you're going to get penalized at the end of the month.
And for the sake of the argument, what you're talking about is the block producer node, which is the most important. It's what's signing and validating. But out of all of the nodes and services we run, that's what the least amount of machines are dedicated. I got a primary and a backup. But our public APIs, you know, there's 3 front-facing public APIs and backups and internal privates. There's internal peering nodes. There's the state history nodes that then feed the atomic APIs, the history APIs. And it's funny because I'll even tell people this is when it comes down to my infrastructure, the block producer node is obviously the most visible and the most painful for everybody if it breaks. But of all of our services, it's the easiest. I just roll over to the backup and, you know, boom, it just does the thing over there. Whereas if your atomic indexes get lagged behind, or you've got to, you know, rebuild a new state history server with, I mean, I just looked at it. It was 12 terabytes of data. That's what a copy of the chain WAX, the chain itself, just the node is 12 terabytes of 3 terabytes of log file and like 10 terabytes or 9 terabytes of state history extra log files. Then you have to feed that into Atomic or Hyperion. And oh yeah, if you want to be able to take it down, or if it has issues, which they do, you need 2, or actually we run 3 of everything for that reason. But you want our public infrastructure to have 99.9% uptime. Guess what? They break, they go down. I need to do upgrades, things like that. So when we say 1 node, oh no, I'd say on average there's 10 nodes minimum for every network that we run. Block producers, APIs, peer meshing to make sure every transaction coming in and out and isn't getting abused by the public and is guaranteed to get it to the next block producer in line. Creating snapshots. You can't create backups when it's running, and you got to have a dedicated server to do that. And oh, you want a backup? 2 times everything. So anyway, just an interesting, people talk about the nodes and you say, what would it take to run a node? Node, 1 server. You wouldn't even qualify for being a block producer because you don't provide your public APIs. You probably wouldn't even score high enough to make very high because you're not providing additional APIs or services or whatnot. So
so beyond the infrastructure hardware and like the redundancies that you have to maintain, part of the scoring system for the top 21 is also rooted in like creating and supplying like valuable things for the WAX blockchain itself.
The biggest part, really.
Value add is, I think, what they kind of refer to that as. What are you doing to add value to the ecosystem? It's valid.
How do you go about approaching that? Like, are you like you said, you might not be like a Solidity developer or someone who can write a smart contract. If you are someone who runs a node, that doesn't necessarily mean you can also write smart contracts. How would somebody who maybe isn't a developer in the sense of being able to deploy a contract or build like an on-chain tool be able to supply value to the network? Or would they then have to outsource that type of development work to remain relevant?
Might need to outsource, might need to do something different. So it's not just building smart contracts. It can be building applications on top. It can be building back-end software that node operators use that a user doesn't necessarily see, but it helps projects and it helps other guilds and things. It can be write content, make videos, live stream. It can be anything that really adds value to the community in some way. I've written a lot of articles, course materials, videos and things. So that's one example. And then you have a lot of things like Michael has recently he built the Minecraft integration for Alien World. So that's one thing that he's working on the side and has a lot of fun things to do with. I also
Yeah.
just checked our Elasticsearch, which is hosting our Hyperion, and this is the overall. So we have duplicated and whatever of everything, and it's 52 terabytes of disk usage on that Elastic cluster right now. And then you can't really just use your normal drives that you buy in the normal hardware stores. You need to have a data enterprise drive, or a data center drive, because there are so many reads and writes, and that is killing drives. So if you have a cheap one, it's not built for that amount of read and writes. It's built for normal consumption.
Or you go the other way
Yeah.
around and just keep a boatload of spares and be prepared to replace them. I replace
Yeah,
an
me,
NVMe
us
drive
and Michael
about once a
are doing
month.
pretty much the opposite
We
direction
always
there.
are. That's what I mean. In all
Yeah.
many different ways. Like they
Yeah.
actually use. I mean, I'll call it more enterprise grade, and I mean, big, massive servers and large enterprise drives. Whereas what we tend to run are i9 infrastructure, which is actually a desktop PC. It has
Yeah.
redundant infrastructure, redundant power supply, and obviously, it's made to stay running, but it's not enterprise grade equipment. Therefore, sometimes my memory has, a bad block or something, and I have to fight that battle. Whereas enterprise, ECC doesn't. My drives, like I use, standard NVMe, Evo drives. And yeah, I mean, these things are taking 20 to 40,000 IOPS a second, nonstop, 24/7, 365. And yeah, after about 6 months, some of them just, nope, your file system's read only. Cool. Grab another one, slap it in. I spend $140 maybe on a NVMe drive and replace
What
it
size?
like a 1 or 2 terabyte. I mean,
Yeah.
So the smaller ones, obviously. But
So that's
like say,
350, 400 for us. Small one.
but I mean, I go through 2 or 3 of them, and he
Yeah.
will not have to deal with that nearly as much. But
Yeah, so
it's
for
different strategies.
example, a 15 terabyte drive of the type we buy is like $2,000. So that is one drive. So that's 15 terabytes, and then we had 52 in that cluster. So then you need to have that on multiple machines, and so you need to have at least probably 8 of these drives, and then you need some redundancy in case one fails, which means that you likely gonna RAID them, or you're gonna run some kind of software. So you need a few extra that just lay there in case one fails, because if you lose this data, it takes a long time to replay. And if each of these are $2,000, then it quickly adds up a lot of money, because you need fast drives if you run an API with a lot of data and anyone wants to get their information quick enough. So if you do a request and it needs to search through, how many documents is there? 133 billion documents in that cluster. It takes a little bit of time to do that unless you make a proper query or you have very fast drives. And then we also have some really fast drives for state and things, which are, I believe they are 750 gigabytes, but they are also $2,000.
Oh, damn.
See, I'll tend to do it is I'll have, a drive that I know may fail, but I'll have 3 machines that, okay, whenever this one goes down, that's fine. We do the maintenance on it, let the others fail over and, continue doing their job. But I got burned on, I would break my cluster and take out all of my backup options at one time. Whereas, well, if I ran 3 of them independently, at least if one broke, the other 2 were up and available. So I tended to actually kind of lean more towards quantity versus enterprise quality. Now, that being said, my shit's faster than theirs because it's a gaming PC. I'm just going to say. Mine's like 5.4 gigahertz CPU. What you got over there? Nah, I kid. But they're 2 totally different beasts. Like I said, he's got one server that has 512 gig of RAM. I can't put more than 128 gig in one server.
It used to have 768, but we pulled some from that and put in other machines because we don't need that much in one machine.
But so that's what I say. I always joke, and we do things really dynamically different. We're doing the same thing for the sake of the argument, they're both acceptable levels of service that they're providing, even though theirs is more expensive. But anyway, it's just different ways of doing it. And that's how the two of us just differ on it. Obviously, a lot of other strategies of, like nations, EOS nations, they co-locate their servers they own. So like Anders and I we tend to run our own location. So it's not so much like a colo cost. We just, capitalize and support the infrastructure. But a lot of people, I think maybe EOSphere does the same thing. They do buy their hardware. They manage and get the enterprise or whatever they want. That drive, that's what I'm getting. But they also put it in a data center. So their OpEx is less, but it's not as accessible, as like me. I mean, if they were to have to replace as many drives as me, they would hate life because they'd be constantly driving to a data center. So there's just multiple different strategies that different BPs have kind of found for managing it. And then all of us have to find our way of adding value. And some of them
of those?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, which of those two strategies do you approach it with, Mike? Mike
there you go.
Yeah, since the two of you guys differ in like this, I'm curious which of those two is going to be the tiebreaker here, or is there going to be a third?
I am not in a position to be putting up that much capital, so I'm renting right now.
Oh, the third. There is a third.
Yep.
There's the third option.
That's probably the more popular option in all fairness. And again, great option because it allows you so much more dynamic. And if you're not really able to commit to doing this strategy, either want to or can, don't do what you got to do. Put it out there. You need another server, spin it up. But Mike also understands that, he probably, those servers that Anders and I were describing, that's probably between $300 and $2,000 a month for each one of them to rent them. And if you've got 10 of them, so it can add up quick. Whereas I pay $2,000 to $2,500 for one of these i9s. I mean, I can buy a shelf of them for 10 grand and run 4 servers, for what roughly
for 1 month,
less than 6 months, or 1 month worth of renting them would be. But my OpEx we own our building. We've already got fiber redundancy. We've got a generator, it just fit better into us. Anders has a farm. Mike, I think I remember weren't you started them out of your garage, right? Don't I remember talking to you when you were having to move them out of your house or something, right? Not as a BP.
Not as a BP, but I was definitely trying to run stuff in. Yeah, you remember I had the hurricane the one time.
Correct. That's what that's one of the reasons I really remember it. I'm like, oh, that was you. But you get started, it works, but you realize very quickly, you can't run it out of your garage. Your internet,
you offered to help me out too, so I appreciate that, man.
We're just here to help. So whenever we can, whoever we can. So.
Damn.
BD had a question here. He said, "Why don't you use Xeon instead of i9?"
So that's call it enterprise versus desktop
commercial,
home grade. Correct. Commercial versus home. Maybe I won't call mine commercial. 2 things. Number one, obviously it's much cheaper, than some of the Xeon and their motherboards cost $2,000. Mine costs $300, and else would do it. What's actually ironic about the i9s, and the reason why a lot of us do use i9s, is when you get into blockchain processing, especially in the nodes. Now, Elasticsearch and some of these other Postgres, whatnot, is better, but blockchain isn't really hyper-threaded or multi-threaded. Remember, you're sequential. I can't do 2 threads at the same time because I got to make, it's one depends on the next. They're one after another. So in a block producer, when our block servers are producing blocks, one thread basically just constantly gets validate, process, sign, because it can't. It can do other things that aren't related, but you don't really use many threads. Matter of fact, most of us go in and disable the extra threads and the hyper threading to make the single threads faster. And of course, an i9 is about one of the fastest per core speed you can get, but it only has 20 cores. Well, if you need 64 or 128 cores for this monstrous 58 terabyte, Elasticsearch. And i9 isn't really ideal for that. It only has a couple of
Do you want to
cores.
know the fun thing though, Michael? In the
Sure.
next generation, you can't say i9 because the i9 is not the best anymore. They have a new naming system from the next generation.
Oh, I thought I saw the 14th gen was still going to be i9, and don't let me
it will
discredit.
be i9, but you will also have to look for Core Ultra, and they have some other names.
Well,
so you
I'm
can have a
already
bad
having to
i9 and a
look-
good i9.
I'm already having to look for the 10900Ks and the 10900Us, and they
Yeah.
already kind of had those. They just mixed them in. But that said, don't let me even discredit
So
AMD
the
stack.
reality is that
Epic
the
Right.
commercial CPUs are made for gamers, and they want a few cores at a really high frequency.
Correct. They're faster,
So that's
but
why they are
don't-
good for validation nodes and potentially also for pushing requests, because you want to know that takes your transaction to the blockchain. What you want that validation of your transaction to have the same time as the producer will have, or you will have a bill that says you're gonna get billed for this amount of CPU for this transaction, because it checks the transaction on the CPU. So if the CPU of that API node is really much faster than the producer, it will charge less, and then it reaches the producer and it will say, no, you don't have enough resources for this. Or if it's too slow, it will say you need way more than you have, and then it might fail on the API, even though it would succeed on the producer node. But outside of that, using Xeon processors are better in a lot of cases. Also, you're not limited on 128 gigs of RAM. You can also use AMD EPIC CPUs, which we have for a lot of elastic nodes and databases. But they are not as fast on single-threaded work, which means that for charging users for the CPU, they would charge more and it would not be as efficient. So users would have to pay more if we don't have the faster CPUs. So that's why we have these metrics and look at it.
Right. That's why it says you need to have a 4 gigahertz or faster, processor.
Yeah, 5 probably for
on all of your nodes, not just your producer, your APIs, your anything that's validating transactions, for the most part, need to have a comparable hardware to all the rest of the node operators. And yeah, I mean, like I say, it's cheaper and it's faster is why we decided to go with the i9s, and how we overcome the consumer grade hardware and limitations of scaling is simply I got 4 of them for the price that he paid for half of his server. I'm
kind of fascinated by how direct the relationship is between like the speed of the hardware on the block producer side and the cost of the CPU to the end user.
It's literally how much time it takes for the hardware CPU to take your information, check if it goes into the block, and then that's how long it took for you to get your transaction processed into the block. That's how much you are charged. So it's the physical time it takes for the transaction. That's how much CPU time you will use.
What really blows people's mind is the relationship between when it hits the node and you get billed and a confirmation. You think that's it. Oh, no. That was just the best guess effort by that front end server. It then has to pass its way through many other nodes to get to where it needs to go, and then ultimately gets processed by that block producer, which hopefully has similar results. But yeah, you're running a potato. You charge them 3 times as much as any other node or what the node they submitted it to said. It got rejected at the block producer because it said, no, you don't have that much resources, even though you really shouldn't have even had to. Or vice versa.
This is only like relevant really for those that are really close to their limit. If you're not close to the limit, it doesn't matter if the first node think that you will be charged more, because it only matters what the producer will charge.
Or if you're not the greatest, I won't say not the greatest, but if your design strategy of your contract smashes them into one, they keep daisy chaining action after action after action after action. They all add up. They're all small actions, but then because they all fire in a line, you need them not to bloat, because the 50% bloat on each one of those would cause some of the bigger contracts to work sometimes and not work other times. And really, I mean, I think the way to do it is refactor it. You kind of split them up into separate contracts and actions and steps. But that was another thing that really started catching people, was not so much that they were running close on their resources. They were pushing the boundaries of what the chain can fit into a half-second block. And if it ran at normal speeds, no problem. But if it hits a node that was twice as slow, it would break.
To explain what it means, if you combine 1,000 transaction into one transaction, so 1,000 transfers, it will take longer to process. And that will still need to fit into the block, and you have a block limit, which is half a second. And usually the last block and the first block of a producer is also shorter, because they also need to process all the blocks from the last producer, and they need to send the blocks in time so the next one has time to actually check that. So then you also have the network latency. So if we have a node in Sweden, and then you have one in Australia after us, and then you have one in Brazil after, that is the least optimal way you can go, and that will affect how many transactions you can fit in those blocks. So that's why we also have an order that goes, so the Europeans go, and then we go to the next place, and then we go around, and EOS Rio made like a map over how all the fiber cables are pulled over the oceans to ensure that we have like the most optimal way to list the producers.
Wow.
And Wax was the first one to do it, because we were the first one. And he jokes about that. It was us. It was the four of us in a row. It was Hong Kong, USA, Sphere, which is over in Australia, and Rio down in South America. We were literally lined up back to back, trying to shove it all the way across the world. And then, yes, it's more efficient when your next person in line is closer, and you know that latency is much smaller. Wax does it in one big circle around the world. Other chains have same mentality, but they just try to make it to where the lineup is optimal, versus it used to just be alphabetical. And Hong Kong, our account starts with an I. Oh, and then it was EOSphere and EOS Rio before them. So I think it started EOS Rio, then to EOSphere, then to Hong Kong, and then to us or something. I don't know.
No, it's not alphabetical only. It's also the location that you.
Now it's the location. It wasn't originally for
long
years.
Time ago. Yeah.
And Wax was the first one to really suffer, to the point that Rio really took the initiative and said, look, this is how the cables are laid. This is how we need to try to line up. And that's what we do now. So, but yeah, there's a lot of intricacies. Yeah. Most people don't realize we have half a second to do everything that we're supposed to do. Get all the transactions, validate the transactions, send the transactions down to the next node halfway across the world before time runs out, and they think that we didn't do it and do our job for us, and then we get penalized for it. You know, so we're talking half second, 500 milliseconds.
Yeah.
In the world of internet, you understand, like 100 millisecond latency is normal, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I can tell you this, for me to talk to Australia's nodes at the most opportune times can sometimes take over a second, just in back and forth communication. I mean, that's
I have
blocks.
4.3 millisecond delay to google.com from here. So yeah, so that's almost nothing, but it's still like if you go up to 30, 50, then it starts to show in gameplay.
Yeah.
Because you also have your ping to the server, but also the other users, and it's the same for this. And even this half second, like if you go and do this optimized test to see how many transactions you are able to push in 1 second, because for some reason the transactions per second is a very interesting metric for people.
Yeah.
So you create these pistol ammo loads, and you just bombard the chain at the same time, a bunch of producers with scripts, of course, and then you use actions that are that are very fast at executing. So it's not, you don't use a big and long actions, but you use smaller ones, smaller transactions. Then you can reach a few thousand. So you can go up towards, I think it was 9,000 per second or per block in jungle. I think we were up to 16, but it's questionable how legit that is. So, and in a real world scenario, it depends on if you push large transactions, it will not be thousands, it will be a few like dozens or 100. And if it's normal transactions or whatever we should call them, it's in the thousands. The capabilities.
I'll say I've been part of tests that have seen some astronomical numbers. Now, how sustainable those are in the real world, and comparing it to a real transaction versus 10,000 token transfers. But yeah, you're not waiting 10 minutes like with Bitcoin, right? I mean, you got 10 minutes before a block even turns over, and this half-second block time it definitely complicates exponentially some of the technical limitations. You don't care how slow your Ethereum node syncs. You got 2 minutes till the block turns over. In our world, it's half a second. Every half a second, there's a new block being validated. And there's 21 of us in over a 2-minute span that are passing this roll and all the pending transactions and all of our completed blocks to the next one.
It's insanely impressive. Like for real world context, the credit card processing company Visa averages under 2,000 transactions per second. Usually
it's only during Christmas they are
6,000
insane.
That's absurd.
I was about to say, I think their peak is like
so
40
fast.
or something like
No,
that.
25, I think. During Christmas, it's around 25.
25, there you go. I mean, it's up there.
They claim that they can handle 26,000 per second, but they average under 2,000 per second. So that's an international remittance network that settles transactions across the entire world all day, every day.
But I mean, if you had if you could scale with sidechains, then you could have one per country. So you could hit these 4,000 or 9,000 per country, but you can have one in Europe, one in US, and then you can, depending on where you are, you can have the lowest latency, and then your transaction will be used on that blockchain. And you could use these chains together to push that boundary if that is interesting. And with the IBC, the connectivity that has been launched, that like you could do that. And even if you have your internal system like Visa has or something, you can just have different chains, and then your transaction will go to the one that is closest, and that is good enough.
But I mean, I'll tell you this, is that even in our world, and I've seen it because we've been here we've been doing this about 5-6 years, right, Anders? I mean, since it really kind of launched and been going. Moore's Law is every 2 years. Let me tell you, I mean, the machines that were these i9s are blowing what we had in 2018 out of the water. So, and our speed test for jungle, I think, were like in 19. So even just in theory, in the next 2 years, not 1-to-1 or 2-to-1, in theory, those numbers would double, because like we said, the way it's built is basically how many milliseconds our CPUs take to do the job that it needs to do. And we have half a second to do it. Well, if your token transfer is running on twice the speed of the processor, in theory, it should take half the time. So you have now increased the capacity twofold just simply by when Moore's Law kicks in and says everything's twice as fast now. It's going to naturally just increase, even if nothing else changes in relation to the software, the technology, or whatever, because it's based and built off of the speed of how long it takes. And the processors constantly march forward. There's this natural exponential, capacity that keeps coming along with. Anyway, when that light bulb went off, I was like, that's an interesting, aspect of it, because that's just constantly marching forward. And in 6 years, I mean, we were running 3 gigahertz CPUs in 2018. Now we're running 5.4.
No, it was still 4. Now we're running 5. I mean, I'm looking at the tests that were done. There was some i7, some i9 9900s.
That's a 5-year-old processor.
And there was some Xeons, But I9900, that one can still be used as a producer.
It's solid.
today.
It's a fast
Yeah.
processor. But my point is that in relation to what the capacity of the CPU is, because that's a lot of the limitation of the TPS, it's naturally being eased just because the CPUs are exponentially getting faster. Anyway, just and all the architecture that goes along with, right? The memory, the drives, and stuff like that.
In that same kind of like concept, as the CPU and the hardware specs, improve over time. You mentioned that it takes about 14 or 18 terabytes currently to maintain like the information that is the WAX blockchain.
Grows
How quickly
about
is
30
that?
gigs a day.
30. Okay, that was the question. Yeah, 30. And
Yeah,
then is
I
that
just
growth?
looked it up earlier today. Somebody asked me the same question. That's how I knew them all off the top of my head. It's about 26, 27 gig a day on average for the last week. Anders in the history, I think, is more along the lines of like 40 or 45 gig a day. I think that the history solutions grow at. I think that's what it was.
I don't know what it grows at right now. I collected that data a while ago, but I don't remember it top of my head.
It's gigabytes and gigabytes of data every day for all these. There's about 150 to 250 transactions every half a second. So add them up.
Is there like, as the chain gets older and older, is there a way to like benchmark some of this data to like consolidate it, like some of the archive
mean
data
archive?
potentially? Yeah, or like so that you're not having to like load 5 years back. You can load to the archive point and then from there forward or something like that, or like to a benchmark or something like that. I don't know.
From a node aspect, yes. So like
Yeah.
if you don't want to have to if you don't need something to have the history for the last 5 years, yes, you can run it on a smaller hard drive and just trim. But if you ask the node for, hey, give me a block from 3 years ago, it's going to say that block doesn't exist because I don't have it, right? So from an infrastructure level, you can, but from the history of the chain, at this point, not really. I mean, you can clean up your data and your tables. If you've got a bunch of crap and chewing up space on the chain that could be deleted and cleaned up, you can kind of reclaim some of the RAM. But all the accounts that get created, all the contracts that are
also
out there
what happens is that drives are getting cheaper and cheaper and bigger and bigger.
It's like your hard drive. You don't ever clean up your hard drive. You just go and buy another one because it's easier to. I don't want to have to delete anything, even though I could.
That's
right.
a good point.
So,
and some of the dies, and that is horrible, but then we can replace them. But what you also can do is, sure, some nodes require all of this information, like all the peering nodes. Every peering node a guild runs should have the entire history, or a new user will be unable to replay the old blocks, and they have to trust the snapshots, and that would be horrible.
Right. Yeah.
You got to trust the Swedes. Yeah, we had that conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And that is like one situation. But then you also have APIs with history. Those you can actually split. So you can have those that have all the old data that are a bit slower because they have so much to go through. You can have a higher rate limit, and then you can have more recent data that can be less documents, fast drives, maybe even run in RAM to optimize the speed. Then you can have way more requests for new data, but you still have access to the old data. You just need to have, for example, you have API dot whatever for the normal one, then you have history dot something for the old one.
For the record, what he's describing is all level 1337 hacks, or I mean,
so that is what we are working on right now to do. No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was trying to think. I'm like, the way you're describing it, I'm imagining it similar to like those Watchtower nodes on the Bitcoin Lightning Network, where like you can run, a Watchtower node that connects to another node that has the full block history, but I don't need to have the whole history on my Lightning Network portal.
You can set up a node that you still need to have enough RAM or fake RAM for the state of the blockchain currently, but you don't need to have all the history. So, and there are features now that you can actually have a configure where how many blocks you want to keep. So you can set it to, I want to keep 20,000 blocks, and then it auto trims everything else. So I have a personal node that I use for building things, and that one I just put on. I think I have 78,000 blocks or something that I have, and everything else just gets removed. So I can build the ship readers and everything against it, and that can be done.
Yeah.
So it's not as expensive, but you still need to have this RAM, or you need to mount the fast drive as fake RAM.
Yeah.
So we have a
Yeah,
question
okay,
from the
I was
chat
gonna
from
say
a
I was
while
gonna go back
ago.
and catch up on them. Yeah, I saw them.
Yeah,
come in.
sorry, I keep asking my own questions.
Alcy was asking, last year it seemed like there was a DDoS attack on blocks where people couldn't transact. And I guess, do you guys have more insight on that?
I think that was
Nick was
answered
saying
already
it-
right below in the chat. It
Nick was
was
saying it was
yeah.
an Alien World botter abusing a feature, but
was there? Where was that?
Oh, was it?
Yeah, I mean,
It is not exactly the same thing. That's the first thing we should say. So when I wrote about that article, I tried to break it down without giving away too much details. And the reason for that is, even though the direct problem was fixed, the underlying issues were not. And as that was not fixed, you can't really share exactly how they did it, because it could be done again.
You're teaching people how to do it. Yeah, I see.
Yeah, exactly. And even though a lot of the issues are solved, it's still possible. If I give enough insight for how you do it, you can start to find ways to go around the solutions, and you can probably find a new way to do a similar thing. But the same thing that they did would not really work today, because we have a new people have better setups for their infra where they actually so what happens really, I can explain the basic thing, I don't need to explain how you actually do it. So the block producer need to go through the entire list of incoming transactions and then put them in the block. If you have a lot of transactions that it goes through that are failing, you still need to process them and see, oh, this is gonna fail, this is gonna fail, this is gonna fail. And that takes time. And if you only have a half second per block, that means that, okay, I don't have a time. I go for validating, okay, one good one and a lot of bad ones. I don't have enough time. So it's basically overloading, but it's done in a very, very sneaky way, where it takes extra time to actually validate those transactions. So what you can do really is that you can validate those transactions on layer before the producer. So instead of having the producer doing that, you can have it on nodes before the producer. So you put this you isolate the producer. It only gets the validated transactions already by a machine that has same capacity as the producer, and then that one is paired with the other block producers. So the transaction layer goes through that layer, and then it goes to the producer. So everything is checked at least one layer or two layers even before it goes, because it might have a timeout. So it goes through the first node, all good. It goes through the second node, all good. On the third node, there is a contract on that account that's froze the transaction. So even though it goes like a good transaction, it's still a good transaction, and then there is a contract that says, I don't want this transaction anymore, so it blocks it. And so the producers, the barrier still thinks it's a good transaction, but for the producer, it's trying to put it in and it gets blocked. And that takes time, and then it needs to do it with another one. But you minimize that a lot by having different limits on the barriers up front and a bunch of things like that.
3 of those nodes I talked about for the network setup, that's the peering nodes. Some of them handle the outside public peerings, and then one of them is typically dedicated to making sure you're peered to the VPs and not getting, trash. And it's that Sentinel filter layer to offload that ability from hitting the VP is how a lot of us have addressed it. But no, it wasn't the exact same issue, but I mean, it was definitely an issue. We were all very aware of it and worked very hard to try to figure out ways. And they've even, a lot of other mechanics and things have changed as well, that the things that were getting exploited maybe changed some of the ways that they were doing things that made it not as big of a target to get picked on like that. So a lot of different scenarios kind of went into it, especially on some of the resolution. The second thing I saw post up on there was Kiefer talking about the limits on the chain. And he's right that, there's a few settings that were set at the beginning, and even 2018, that these settings were kind of decided upon and set in, but CPUs have gotten faster. We've learned different options and things. So there are some knobs, even on just the chain settings. When we talk about there's half a second, really we only use about 200 milliseconds to actually do billing and processing to give us that time for the extra work. Well, actually, you can make it a little bigger window. There's also some, ironically, you can't run super small transactions. So there's a bottom limit. Well, you can actually reduce that limit, and you could probably fit more smaller transactions into the bigger block window. But anyway, point is that there's a lot of room to be tweaked and a lot of different facets that go into that whole TPS. But yeah, right now we're at 4,000 TPS, and that's a legitimate claim in itself.
Aside from bringing the Wax blockchain to a crawl, is there a benefit to somebody doing that exploit or attack, I would say, of like just spamming fake transactions to slow down the network? Like, do they get anything out of that?
Yes,
other than,
they do.
They weren't doing it because
they front run trades. So let's
there
say
it is.
you are trading on Alcor and you want to get your trades at the best price, and if you make sure that you are more likely to get there, then it's a benefit for you. So there is an incentive to do it, and that's why it was so important to take the time to educate teams and to do everything to set that up, because we were a few producers that did this, and even some of our barriers that we have was not enough because we were keep getting all these transactions from everyone else, so they also needed to do this to reduce it. So I put up an article and I sent it to Luis, and I sent an image also on Telegram, and that is my simplified graphic, which is not simple to understand, because everything here is, we quickly go into something very complicated and complex, and you need to understand a lot of underlying situations, like underlying functions of a computer and a networking, and how to do this to really understand how things work. So this graphic is really like a user action, and what is going from the you push, I want to buy this NFT, and then it jumps through all these hoops before it reaches the blockchain, and everything here goes like this because your transaction is usually in a block within a half a second. And that is like the simplified version of that, and it's if you like, some guilds struggle to grasp this, because if you are not the experienced system administrator or experienced in these kind of things, it is a lot of information to digest. It's not just to spin up a node and then get your money. It's a lot of knowledge that is required, and a lot of expertise, time, and someone needs to do all these tests, figure out how to best do it, and then you have 2, 3, 4 different solutions that are all pretty good, and that is a good thing.
Yeah, I remember this article when you wrote it. This definitely helped me understand how the network of nodes actually worked on Wax. When I saw this flowchart, I was like, oh, okay, this is way more complicated than I expected, but also makes a lot more sense how it actually works, because it just felt like magic a little bit, when I first got into this stuff, where it's like how all the information is there, all the data is there, everything's readily accessible in a matter of seconds. And this really helped.
So earlier, Michael was talking about how often he was having drives fail. When you have hardware fail, do you need someone to manually reroute into the new hardware, or is there like some sort of automated system where if something goes down, your other hardware takes over?
Yeah, we pretty much have for like the APIs and stuff like that, the 95% 95% of the nodes and services we run, we have both public-facing proxies and even internal proxy servers, which are basically a little, a central point that say, I know that there's 5 servers that do this. I'll check them every couple of seconds, and if they're not online, take them offline, and when they do come online, put them back in. So when a server dies and goes offline, for the most part, the proxy will, the public traffic will get routed over to the next in line it needs. The internal traffic will get routed to the ones it needs. The alarms start going off and saying, hey, that server is no longer responding. Somebody needs to fix it. Then is the manual, repair or replace or whatever. So for the most part, most services, because they're redundant, will auto fail over and then ultimately just have to kind of be manually repaired and fixed, except for block production. That ironically is still 5-6 years into this, almost impossible to properly automate and implement a failover to another node. And
No.
You can say what you want. Now, you know what most of us do? We unregister and say, look,
it takes 5 blocks for us. If we miss 1 block, it takes 5 blocks for us until the new node is operating and running. It's not even a full round.
I'm not
but it's
saying
2 seconds.
You
maybe 3.
Potentially hack something up together. But okay, number one, it's 1337 level shit. And number 2, I still don't believe it's infallible, my man. Because
nothing is there's always something that could go wrong.
What's ironic is the way you set up a node is you have your dedicated key that is assigned to validating transactions. But if that node is not responding, there's not really an automated way built into the software, at least, to number one, even know that your node isn't working right. You have to be outside looking in to know you're not working. And number 2, there's no real on-chain mechanism to say, oh, that one's not working. Try this other one instead. You can send a command to do that.
That doesn't exist on any chain, though.
I've got SQL Server clusters that have no problem coming to a quorum about who's the master and who's the validator.
But no proof of stake chain is. You're not allowed to have 2 validators at the same time.
I didn't say that it shouldn't be. I'm just saying is that look, there's developed software that has no problem coming to a consensus about who's master and who's slave. But in our world, after all these years, for obvious reasons, it's not just because they hate us, there's still no automated mechanism to properly detect and fail over to a second server that doesn't have a potential for running both servers at the same time or not properly failing over and neither one of them still working. Or so what a lot of us do is we monitor, we react by, it's basically throwing in the towels. They like, look, let the standby step in. We've got some problems, and then we address the issues and either fail it over if it can't be fixed, or get it back online and up and running. But don't listen to the Swede. If they
can't do it,
it's because he
with Bash.
Then, yeah, he can't do it with the code I use. That's true.
You said twice, and I feel like from context, I understand 1337 is homebrew or hacked together by yourself kind of thing. What is that expression?
Leak. That's just, I call it 1337, but that's 1337.
Someone doing something good.
The hacker nerds.
1337.
I don't know. I mean, probably 30 years ago, the computer science nerds, it's elite in numbers. And then they drop the
elite. There it is.
Yeah, I know from Counter-Strike.
There you go.
This is
but
like
I call it 1337. So I mean,
Alcy, I think it was way before 4chan, but it was a big thing there.
It's like the 10T error.
ID 10T.
Yeah, error ID 10T. Yeah.
Right. Or the PMBOK error, problem between the keyboard and the chair. Anyway, but yes, that and when I say that, you get that. Look, I mean, Anders and a lot of the rest of the Sweden crew are some of the top level. I mean, obviously they know it ins and outs. They're severely technically superior in oh, it doesn't do that. Let me just make it do that. But for the most part, a lot of what they or even we do, most people probably don't. I mean, I don't know. Since me and Anders talk all the time, Mike, how do you run your API nodes and your failovers?
Also, yeah, you can jump in first, Mike.
Yeah, basically, I just have to have a backup and proxy it over to the other one. And for the producer, I have a script to check it every so often and unregister it if it's not responding, and then register another one.
How long does it take for if it doesn't respond? Do you got 5 seconds or?
Yeah, I haven't had to luckily run into this issue yet, but
okay. I'm curious if Anders has got everybody licked on his speed for turning around on those.
I'll say this: Sweden doesn't miss many blocks, and they don't double sign, which is the other side of having 2 nodes running at the same time doing the same job, which is actually way worse, in my opinion, than not signing blocks to begin with. That's why our fail-safe is I'd rather not sign the blocks for 6 seconds than to have this failover strategy not work right. And it happens a lot on all these chains to where 2 block producer nodes are running at the same time. Because what it starts doing is shoving out 2 versions of the chain to the entire network. And all of my history servers and atomic servers and indexers are constantly, it's called forking, and they're rolling back. The information I got is not what was valid on the chain. I got to undo what I did and redo to catch up. And if you don't have fast servers, I mean, it just crushes some of these servers because there's so
that's
much
why you buy good hardware, right?
Well, I mean, I'm more mean just the reason double producing is worse than not producing at all. These failover mechanisms, they fail over and the original server comes back online. And
there's a reason why we have 10 gigabit internal network for everything like this. Because you need that added speed to make everything work properly. And right now, like Luis is looking at the missed blocks, and I want to have an interesting comment here. Because in the early start of the OIG, the missed blocks were a big metric that everyone looked at. But if I am in the schedule as a producer, I can mess with people in front of me and after me, and I can make them miss blocks.
Correct. We all are marching in a cadence. And if one of us gets out of step enough, it actually, you'll trip the person in front of you or behind you. So the person getting penalized isn't actually the one that's causing the problem. It really just, you've got to, when we talk about being peered to our neighboring VPs, we're all friends with each other because we work together. But like I stay peered with Detroit and Sentinel and Rio because they're after us. But the people that are closest to us are the people that are next in line. So we're constantly making sure, like when I moved my block producer, I had to reach out to all of the people that were close to me and say, you now need to sync to this server over here because I'm not actually over here anymore. And if you don't get it to this server in time, I'm going to kick your block out, even though you did your job. I just said you didn't, and I win.
So when you do, go on.
Yeah, so what we do there is we make sure that we try. So we use WireGuard, which is this open source VPN network, where we try to get everyone close to us in the schedule to pair up with us through that VPN network. For a few reasons. Then we have one reliable peer that cannot be clogged by the public peer. So each public peer will have a limit on how many can connect to them. So if we have this private one, which is the VPN, that will always be open, available for the guilds to ensure that the transactions can move and the blocks can move properly. Then we have nodes that only peer blocks and nodes that only peer transactions. So the block peers, we try to connect them to the other ones close to us as schedule as fast as possible. So from us, they get our blocks as fast as possible. And so that minimizes that a lot, but not all guilds want to set up this, which is good. We shouldn't have one thing that could fail everyone. So you can also have this set up by having just other public other peers that are not listed as your public one, and it would pretty much be the same thing. Or you could have one that only whitelist IPs that are allowed to connect through that, which some of the teams do.
Wait, I'm looking at this report. I mean, this isn't fair. I've got one missed round, but you've got like 6 times more missed blocks than I do. That's
Yeah.
I mean, that's the difference.
One of our neighbors do not want to peer with us properly. I can tell you that.
I was going to say, I mean, in all honesty, my one missed round is probably worse than their 261 missed blocks, because sometimes that half a second delay, even when you're set up properly. I mean, I've had my blocks be just held up because the solar flare hit, you know? I mean,
yeah, it can be latencies in the network. It can be a lot of different things.
Correct.
But what we do also for redundancy, that was a question like 10 minutes ago, is that we have this proxy load balancer, and it has connection to all our API nodes. And that software is also checking how far behind all those nodes are from the head block. And if they are behind 10 blocks or 15 blocks, then we mark that as down. So no more traffic will go to that one until it's catched up, and then it goes up and is available again. So we built that for HA proxy, so anyone can use this in our public repo.
Nice.
And yeah, so that is perfect for... Yeah,
an example of building something that isn't necessarily public facing, but that is building value for Wax.
Yeah, exactly.
Like something that block producers use.
I don't think they get I'm curious that though, for the sake of the argument. But yes, it is. It is critical because the server's up. It's just not in sync, so you don't need to use it. But.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a points-worthy thing to build. I'm also curious when it comes to the double spend you were talking about, or double sign rather. If you do create a double sign because you know 2 of the parallel nodes signing the same thing, and then you end up with like a fractured chain, how long does that fork chain keep running before it eventually becomes invalid?
Half a second, 1 second. I mean, it is an amazingly efficient mesh of protocol for that consensus.
Yeah. Except if you're Michael, because he can continue on his for hours.
Well, that's it. Yeah. Unless you can trigger what I mean, it is affectionately known as the EOSUSA coma. I could break this software to where my node swore all other 20 nodes were wrong, and it was the only one that would sign, and it just kept doing its thing like it never missed a beat. Now I'm like, I don't even know how that's possible, but
you got your own
the funny thing is, the software is broken, but it's only happening in Michael's environment.
Correct. And that's what they're like, it's only you. And I'm like, no, it wasn't. I was just the only one because I'm on-prem and I like to break shit. They did eventually figure out how to reproduce it and have since fixed the software because it was a flaw to where networking issues could cause a coma. That all being said, as long as your node is operating properly and syncing with the peer, it is amazingly fast. Within a second or two, that every single node says, whoa, I just got another block that said that one isn't right. Roll it back. And so the other chain only exists almost as these, you know, what was Einstein talking about quarks popping in and out of existence? You know, I mean, it's instantaneous because immediately the chain says, wait. I mean, I don't know if you know how blockchain works. The last block is linked to, or the first block was linked to the last block, and it says something broke it, go back to the last proper link. And then it says, oh, well, there's the block that everybody said was valid. Attach that to my chain, and then double signing sends another one. It says, nope, this still isn't linked right. And that's how we detect it, because our nodes start flapping really bad, saying, I'm getting blocks and rejecting half of them. And then Matthew comes in and pings somebody and says, hey, dummy, you're double signing, because it's hard to detect that. You don't know it. It's those of us that are monitoring our nodes at 1337 levels go, something's wrong. It shouldn't be forking this much. And then you recognize the pattern. Every 2 minutes for 6 seconds, Atomic starts lagging, Hyperion history starts lagging, nodes start lagging. Yes, Yes, they do.
Nothing lags.
Your magic 5-second failover doesn't prevent double signing forking and stuff. I
No, it
know this
doesn't.
for a fact.
No, it doesn't prevent the forking, but it
Correct.
doesn't create any lag for us either.
Well, and that's what you've got enough machine. I mean, I've got enough machines and whatever now that it shows up as an alert that, hey, it forked back. It's not crippling, but if you're running a regular server, it's crippling, and it does cripple some people's stuff. Not so much on Wax, but that's why I say double signing is actually, in my opinion, far, far worse than missing blocks, as long as it's not extended duration, because at least it just pauses things for 6 seconds. And as long as the transactions don't expire, they still can get picked up and processed, and it just kind of slows things down. Double signing, they're going in, they're getting processed, we're all doing work, and then having to go back and rework it, you know, and there was actually some bugs in the NodeOS software recently where something broke in an update and those fork notifications weren't properly going out. So if you were sending forked blocks, there was a time where some of the indexers never got told your blocks got forked out and you needed to go down another path. The chain knew to do it, but the indexers didn't. Does that make sense? Those layer 2s. So it's painful to those extra services as much as it is to the chain.
Is there an experience the end user would see potentially in such a scenario, like when there's a
double signing?
When there's a fork, when there's a double sign, is it possible for me to like do a transaction and then later check my wallet and everything's been reverted because that transaction was part of a double sign fork that didn't actually?
What typically happens is if it gets signed into a forked block and then gets forked back out, those transactions should have been processed by the other fork because they were pending in theory for both.
Yeah,
now,
so what would happen for a user is really that maybe the UI you are using is showing your transaction as paused, but it actually never did. So on chain nothing happens, but UI, the information that gets might be faulty for a second, and that's why it shows, but that actually never happened on the chain. But for a user, they might not see any difference in that.
We used to get reports of like atomic, because some of these sites, you know, like when you're blending and stuff like that, you need that atomic to be almost instantaneously updated. And when it's going through a lot of these forkings and rollbacks, and it's a high activity part of the chain, they would start to notice, maybe not on Sweden's shit because they're awesome, but what would happen is that because it was spending a couple of seconds rolling back and catching up, is that immediate requery wouldn't catch that either something got blended or that something was in their wallet, and it would kind of hang them up that the site only refreshed once expecting it to be there because I just did it. You'd have to manually refresh or whatever. So a little bit of that kind of UI lag, but really only a couple of seconds or maybe a transaction or two, because it's pretty quick at trying to repair. And it's only 6 seconds for every 2-minute rotation, because there's 21 DPs that are just doing 12 blocks, half second a piece.
I mean, as an end user over the last like 2 years of the Wax blockchain, I've done thousands and thousands of transactions and never had any issues with like a reversion, or like a revert or a failed transaction. I guess I've had like errors where a transaction wasn't being able to be pushed because something had changed before my, sign went through. But other than that, like,
they're out there.
The
I can promise. I was actually working with one of the games on Wax, MBM, the Battle Miners, that they use a lot of public APIs, to round robin and whatnot. And some of us, and I was working with them because it was our nodes for some reason, it would accept them, and somewhere in the mesh, as it was going through all the syncing, they got lost into oblivion. So on Anders' little chart, on one of those little boxes, one of those nodes was stopping it, and they picked up on, they were submitting transactions. My front nodes were saying, yep, you're good. But then as it started to pass its way, it vanished, like Anders called it.
So Micah never gave them to us.
Yeah, that's ultimately they did. They got eaten somewhere in my mesh. And I mean, we ended up fixing it and chasing it down. But ultimately, it's almost on the developers and that's a thing that we try to explain to, the blockchain developers is that, look, Web 2, when you did it, you expected it to be done. Web 3, number one, you got to wait a little bit for it even to come back and say that it's been done. And you need to account for it potentially not having really been done or having been done in a slightly different order than what you did. I was telling them, I issued a token contract. This was on testnet, thank God, but I was shoving it in so fast, and because all my nodes are here, I guess is the reason why, but I was creating a token contract, creating tokens, and issuing tokens, 3 separate actions at the same time. And the system, through the syncing process, ultimately rearranged the order. It published the contract. It then issued tokens that didn't exist, but it passed enough logic that it was able to process, and then minted and created the tokens. So the net result was I minted 500,000 tokens out of a supply that didn't reflect those tokens existed, because when I submitted them, they were in the right order. But by the time they all got processed and put into the chain in the same block, they actually got moved around, and it happened to be worst case scenario. It issued tokens before they were created, before the token was actually created, because it doesn't assert if you send the wrong token. Anyway, long story short, but that's an interesting conundrum that you have to understand Web3 development, and Mike probably understands it as well as anybody, because he's probably wrote as much front end heavy lifting.
I lost the internet for a second. Are you guys able to hear me all right? Or?
Oh,
yeah, we can hear you.
You're good.
I had to switch my connection. I missed some of the conversation, but I think you're talking about using off-chain data or APIs to push transactions and stuff like that. Is that
just understanding how being a Web3 developer and working with the blockchain and the APIs and waiting for finality and forking transactions out that you were told were submitted to the chain? That is a whole nother level of comprehension that we've really had to work with a lot of devs to. That's not normal. When you do it and are told it's done, you expect it to be in the database. And somewhere down the road, and nobody knows why, nope, never got included. But I told you it was. And that's what, as a developer, I was saying Mike probably really had to comprehend that early on.
Yeah, the topic of like non-custodial token stuff keeps coming up a lot with people, and I'm trying to explain to them why it's a little more difficult than they think to just like query an API and find out where tokens are and then give them to people. I know there's defuse and stuff like that. I have to get more familiar with it, but yeah, it's not so simple, because the API data that you get might not always be like completely consistent with what you're expecting, and then you make a mistake and you push one wrong transaction, and people lose a lot of money. So
here's the best way I've described it, is that blockchain data is great for validating data. It is absolutely horrible for using data, trying to traverse massive tables or have multiple indexes or get the history of, well, what were my last 10 transactions? The native layer 1 blockchain, it's like your checkbook. It's not designed to be a queryable database of all the pieces of information. It's designed to be a ledger to say, when you look at your current balance, you trust it because every page and every transaction that led up to it was valid. But if you really
that's why
wanted
we
to go
take
back
that
and validate
and put it in other places. We
well,
put it in
you'd have to
SQL,
go-
we put it in Elasticsearch,
yes,
make it
Just like in your
searchable, and we
checkbook,
can get this
you'd
info.
have to either go back through every page and say, I did this check, this check, this check, this check, or have all of that in some sort of relational database, layer 2, Hyperion, Atomic, Diffuse, Memento, Chronicle, Iris. There are all sorts of all these layer 2s that are trying to fill the gap of, you can ask the chain, is this data valid right now? And it's going to say, I promise, Mike D only has 5 million wax in his account. And you can trust me when I say that.
Small fry.
Right?
Yeah.
But if you ask, how did Mike get those 5 million transactions? The chain doesn't do a good job of telling you that. You'd have to go, well, did he send it in block 1? No, we'll check block 2. No, we'll check block 3. And then that's where the history of indexing it says, go and query that damn table of 53 billion documents. How many did you say were in there?
133 billion.
133 billion documents,
Yeah.
and show me all the ones that are on Mike's account and order them by descending date of send date, right?
Yeah, so obviously
the
you have
chain
them
doesn't do that.
indexed in a smarter way, so you don't need to look for all of them.
Yeah,
Mike's
for
gonna have to
people,
have a disclaimer. He's like, I don't really have 5 million wax. He's gonna get his fingers cut off.
barely got 5. Yeah, for people out there who don't understand like what indexing is, it's basically like if you had a table full of like 1 million records from A to Z, let's say, and you had to find something with Z and you wanted to search for it, if there's no index for A to Z, you'd have to loop through every single one of the 1 million records to get to Z just to find the 1,000,000th one. Whereas like if you create something called an index, which you can do off chain, it basically sorts it in a way where you're able to search like halfway through and then halfway through if you're not there yet. And you get to Z like extremely fast versus having to loop through all 1 million. So that's why like off-chain indexes are required for certain APIs.
The most basic example of that people have used is Excel. The numbers on the left side and the letters on the top. Those are how you can identify where things are very quickly. So it's the same way as that you have a faster search function for it.
And blockchain has some of that, but it's somewhat limited because I mean it has its particular purpose and roles. It's more about validity of the data more than the usability of anything other than current state. It's wonderful at what is it right now, and you can trust me without a doubt. But if you want to try to do anything with, well, how did I get there? Or show me multiple pieces or whatever, or show me what it was 5 minutes ago. It's an amazing level of technology that it takes to index it, scrape it, run it. I mean, he's got a 54 terabyte database for you to be able to query what were the last 5 transactions I just sent from my account.
Yeah. That's definitely something that I think is a great way to understand about every cryptocurrency. When you have a balance of crypto in any of your wallets, it isn't a balance of crypto associated with the wallet. What you're looking at is the remainder of the sum of all the transaction history of that wallet address on that ledger.
And that's what we refer to as the state. So that's the big 90 gigs worth of memory that gets chewed up. That's, you know, why you need this big monstrous node hardware for Wax is because there's what 15 million accounts that all have active balances, and I don't even know how many active contracts there are and how many of those have table rows, and you know, all of those are just balances or table records stored in a table in memory is ultimately where that's how it can run that fast. Is it's not reading it from disk, it's actually in memory, but it's only current state. If you want to do anything from half a second ago, this is now. You need something else to have gone back and said, I'll write down what it was at this time and at this time and at this time, and then you can go back and okay, show me this, 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 and this, which Mike does all the time.
Maybe Mike D can answer this one, but I'm curious, like, since he's the newest blockchain producer, how do you like learn all of this stuff if you're coming from the outside and you want to get into blockchain production? Like, what resources do you use? Do you need to find a mentor? Are there books you can read about this? Like, what did you do to be able to get from a user / creator on Wax to being a blockchain producer?
Yeah, so my situation might be like slightly different than other people, but I guess it's still pretty valid. I came in a year ago and started building contracts. So when I was building contracts and I first came along, I knew nothing about contracts, and I also knew nothing about nodes. I thought having my own node was a lot more required than it was, because I just didn't. Everybody comes along when they develop a project and they're like, I need my own node, and they start talking in the API channels trying to pay people for nodes because they think they need to. So that's where I was. That's when Michael brought up earlier about how I was running something out of my house that I thought I had to. So I was trying to run my own node at first. So I had a little bit of experience with that. so I was somewhat familiar with like the software and the hardware requirements, but I didn't really fully know everything. I do have somebody helping me, like a mentor, teaching me how to do this stuff. So I've been learning from somebody who's already done it and doing it now. So that's pretty much how I learned. The IGs are also extremely helpful. Like, it's funny because people complain a lot that they don't do anything or whatever. I don't think I've ever waited longer than 5 seconds to get an answer from Kafer about anything. The dude is like 24/7, just like he responds to everything all the time. I've had so many stupid questions that he's answered for me. So IGs and existing guilds are very helpful if you're trying to learn.
And I
There's
will say
also
that there's some
sorry.
document that the Antelope, you know, the coalition that writes the software understands how difficult it is to wrap your head around what type of nodes, what maybe the best practices are. And there is, we meet weekly and actually are really kind of going through and trying to better develop some of that documentation really for all chains. It applies to WAX or EOS or a lot of them, you know, because they all kind of run the same base software. But all this magic 1337 shit that's in mine and Anders and now Mike's head that, oh no, don't do that. Or, oh, you're seeing your last block forked out. Well, that's because your neighbor. You can look on your stuff all day long. It's not your problem, it's theirs. But trying to help dump a lot of this years of experience into either fixing the software or documenting how to better do it. We talked about the peers and the next person in line and how your block will get dropped out. There's a new feature, it's in there. I don't know if it's 100% perfect yet, that should automatically try to know the next block producer in line and try to talk to them instead of just any random peers. So they're twofold, trying to make the software less, you know, demigod to be able to run, but then also, look, there's just sometimes you need to know information and things we figured out, putting that into more formal documentation to say, if you're running a block producer, these are the things you need to do. These are the things you don't need to do. And these are the features that make it work better automatically, type of thing. Make sense?
Yeah, and also I just wanted to mention that Ross from EOSPhere has some extremely useful articles out there. There's a lot of them on setting up nodes, very detailed. So I would advise people to look
I
those up.
refer to them from time to time. Like I say, I do all the stuff all the time, and I'm like, what is that setting? Let me go pull up that. Those are some of the best guides I think I've probably seen on a lot of the software that nodes, block producers, Hyperion history, Atomic. He's got it's a medium, it's a bunch of medium articles, but he did finally go back and make a table of contents. So you don't have to stumble your way through all of his medium links. You just got it. You can go to a table of contents. So there is a link for the.
I feel the need to mention too, since there are some people out there who are like completely unfamiliar with contracts and nodes and stuff, and like ChatGPT is a big thing right now. If you ask that thing some stuff, it's going to tell you stuff that looks amazing and seems to work. Like, definitely do not deploy stuff to the mainnet and put people's money at risk if you don't know what you're doing, because I've like just messed around with that thing just to see how it works and what it could tell me, and like compared it to like contracts that I've written. It's like crazy what it can tell you, but if you actually look at it, there's like so many security errors with just math overflow and all these different things that if you don't know how to write code, man, like you're gonna lose people a lot of money. So
Well, or even understand the way blockchain works, because I know a lot of people have gotten burned by that assumption that, you know, one action, then the next action, then the next action. And a lot of these exploits and hacks and stuff are simply getting them into scenarios to where it didn't go 1, 2, 3. They caught it at 2 and ripped it, you know, and you have to understand it's different. It's not Web 2 code is law. No. They can actually kind of stop things and even front run and stuff like that. That it's you, and yeah, ChatGPT doesn't understand that, and even good, what I would consider good experienced Web 2 developers don't always take that into account, or even good Web 3 developers that may get caught on well, if you add a negative number to a negative number, it becomes a positive number that you may send out to somebody. right? That's been
the
exploited a lot of times.
The incentives for breaking these contracts aren't quite as surface level on Web 2 either. Like on Web 3, there's a very direct incentive to breaking a contract.
When it's so
draining
quick
the
to
funds.
and get it out to a place where it's irrecoverable. I mean, within,
by the time people know what's happened, you already have your plane ticket to Aruba.
It's washed 15 times. I mean, if you know what the hell you're doing, it's almost impossible to react to it. But I've been floored how many people, like I say, is I understand simple math. Negative plus negative equals a positive, right? But obviously it is very easy in 5 million lines of code for it to, kind of get lost in there. Is that, oh yeah, this, then this, never did a boundary check or something. And a very simple flaw is that one little hole. And like Mike says, you could have people's lots and lots of money.
Especially when you're
instantaneously.
Yeah, especially when you have contracts that are like, balancing a derivative asset or something like that has input and output constantly moving. And then, like you said, if you can jump in the line between step 1, 2, and 3, if you can do step 3, then 2, like that's it. You can drain the whole contract.
The other thing that I never even really took into account had nothing to do with bugs. Flash loans.
Oh, flash loans.
So many people design things to be like, well, you can't do it because you need $50 million to do that. No, you need to commit to spending about $3,000 in interest and rent them for an hour, wreck shop, and then be like, thank you. Here's an added bonus on it.
You can straight up flash loan Ethereum for 1 block. Like you could take the loan and then return it on that same fucking block. Yeah.
So that's what I say is that catch, a lot of people, consider that scale of, well, it's so big. You'd have to have half of the network. Is half of the network available in a lending protocol? Better watch your ass.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to understand that until you get fucking wrecked.
And that's what I say. And I don't do a lot of development. That's why I say I get it, and it's only because I've seen the suffering of a lot of smart people that they ain't idiots. And it's like, I get it. And I've written enough code in my bash days of, oh yeah, didn't think about that one, clink, 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 clink. But
I'm writing a smart contract with ChatGPT right now. First I asked it to write a staking contract, then I asked it to look for vulnerabilities in that contract, and now I asked it to fix those issues. So you can also do that in those tests. Now I don't know if it actually does that, but it say, I found these 9 vulnerabilities. Okay, can you go and fix that? Sure. And then it starts to write new code.
Here's this code I wrote you that I know has 9 vulnerabilities in there. If you just ask me, I'll tell you.
The problem is you didn't prompt it right. You got to be like, can you write me a staking contract with no
doesn't
vulnerabilities?
Have vulnerabilities.
No, you take that in steps, because the larger problem you try to solve in one question, the worse it will be.
I get it. It's just
so you will take it in small things, and then you can combine them, and then you can ask it questions about that, and then you can refine it after.
It's also just like stupid sometimes. So like this is getting a little bit technical for people, I'm sure, but like different integer types and static casting things and stuff like that. Like I asked it the other day about like an int64 maximum value or whatever, and then like it's different for assets on Wax, even though it's kind of the same type. It has a different max value, which is lower than the normal for that type. And I told it that. I was like, this is the actual max value. Show me, fix this security thing right here if I was to present you with this problem. And then it gave me the completely wrong thing for the normal limit instead of the one for the asset, which if I had deployed that without knowing the difference, like that would have lost people a lot of money, or me a lot of money, I should say, I guess. Even though like that thing told me it was fixing the problem, it wasn't, because like it's just stupid, I guess, sometimes, even if you
it lies to you.
Yeah.
It's
that probably didn't make any sense at all, but
it's kind of crazy. Ultimately, I think what like a lot of these especially the chat AI like tools is effectively like libraries of templates that it can then mash together to produce what you're asking. So more or less, it's like doing doing the intro tutorial template stuff that you can find. So if you're trying to do something like blockchain, like smart contract development, you know, don't expect it to produce anything better than what you could create after, you know, watching some intro YouTube videos or something.
In my experience, like I do music and I've asked ChatGPT to write me songs and stuff. It gets like 75 to 80% of the way there.
Yeah.
But really, I think in every medium, like you still need to be an expert that understands how they get it from 80 to 100% to actually use it. Like it'll get you close, but it'll never actually get you to the final product.
I'd go on beyond that too. I would say in every medium, that last, like if you can get 90% of the way there automatically, great, and anything, awesome. But that last 10%, that's where you like that's where the work is. Like,
that's critical.
everywhere.
I mean, that's where the flaws and vulnerabilities get. Oh, you can't do that. You'll buffer overrun, you know, or whatever.
Exactly.
I mean, but yeah, I'd heard most developers, and like I say, I'm not a heavy developer. I bash where I have to, but and JS if I have to do a script, but that about 50-50 on the coding side, at least whenever it kind of first came out, was that if you asked it to do something relatively simple or, you know, within kind of those cookie cutter frames, that it would, you know, do a pretty good job and give you either 95%, if not 100% on, you know, the simpler tasks, you know, just, it saved you having to piecemeal hello world shit together, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Enumerate all the files in this directory with Python. Okay, solid. But write me a staking contract that, you know, uses stable coins on this blockchain and, you know, whatever. Okay, here's 50% of it, but it's so far off on the specialty and expertise or wrong that it was almost.
It's a better idea to use AI tools like ChatGPT or anything like that at the moment, at least in their current iteration. The concept in my mind is you use them as if they were members of your team, which you are the lead of, not as if they are a contractor for something that you have no fucking idea how to do.
I look at it as like how, and it's how I Google foo. I don't know if it's how everybody, but how I learned a lot of the little bit of code that I know or snippets or whatever was you go and you Google and you find, you know, Stack Exchange or, you know, Web3, whatever. And a lot of the answers you get may be wrong. You may try to do them. They don't really work right, but you kind of learn as, you know, those are different avenues of wrinkles in your brain. Well, I consider ChatGPT another one of those. Okay, well, if I were to Google this term, let me read it. I'll try it, but in no way, you know, I need to understand what it's saying and use it as a source of knowledge as opposed to copy paste. Here's my final product, right? You know,
it's a good search engine. It's better than finding for specific problems, and it's also great at explaining differences between like different coding languages, or if you need to, you have a problem that you know how to solve in one way, but you need another way to solve it, or you want to find a different way. In those cases, it's really good. Or if you want to translate code from one language to another to understand it better, I've done that as well. I saw some C++ code that I kind of understood and asked it to, can you write this in Python for me? And then it wrote it down and I can read it, and I understood better what it did than I did from just C++.
That's what I use it for most of the time, is like to help me understand something that's technical or that I'm trying to understand. It's really like if you're watching our stream right now and you don't necessarily understand some of the tech stuff we're talking about, you could just be like, hey, ChatGPT, what's the difference between a multi-thread and a single thread processor? You know, and it'll tell you in layman's terms. You don't have to know anything about tech. Or you could be like doing DeFi stuff and, I don't know, playing with like a perpetual contract market, and then be like, I kind of get how to trade on this, but you can be like, hey, ChatGPT, how does a perpetual market stay solvent? And it'll explain that in terms that you can understand without being
research,
like a financial.
We've actually been using it a lot. Yeah, is that like we've got some projects that are in like the automotive industry, and so we've really been kind of like, if you have a question about the industry or about different things like that, ask it, and it's great about saying, here's all the different metrics, and, you know, using real world description about, if you were to go and Google and find all these different articles and kind of write your own summary, is that, yeah, you're right. You know, and those are easy metrics for it to go out and find and have harvested. Whereas writing code and being proper and all of that. It's a whole different level, but it is great for research. And my graphic artist showed me the AI in the latest Photoshop. Holy shit. Legit drew a square around a car in a garage and said, remove the car. And it completely removed it, completely replaced everything in the background seamlessly, and gave her 5 different options. Do you like this replacement or this replacement or this one? It was mind blowing that she simply took a picture, drew a square, and typed in, remove this car. And instantaneously it was a perfect.
It's unreal. You can also do stuff like if we took like the picture of you here talking to us and you're with your background and the picture of Anders in his background, I could put that onto the same like canvas, just like slightly apart, and be like, okay, fill in the negative space, and it'll make it look like you're like in the same, like sharing the same space.
It's mind blowing on the images. And then, like I say, on like research, how effective it is even at this stage. But
unbelievable.
Anyway, it's crazy. I always ask my graphic artist about it. You know, I'm like, how do you feel about it? And she sees it as she's happy about it because it gives her so much more tools to create so much more awesome stuff with less work, right? She doesn't see it as, nah, you're not going to replace, you know, graphic artists. I mean, you're going to replace the kiddies, you know. Now you're going to have to be a real graphic, you know, artist to be able to cut and survive. But
you're replacing the technician.
Tools, great, using those AI tools to be able to further her graphic development. That's been amazing just to watch this last little bit, but kind of caught me off guard. I figured that most graphic artists wouldn't like it because it's kind of pushing them out of a job. But
yeah, it just becomes another tool for your toolkit.
Correct. Yeah.
Like Copilot and ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Correct.
Exactly.
Does this mean I have to become a real developer now, or?
No.
Now you can use ChatGPT. Just understand, man.
It means you get to.
Yeah, Web3 doesn't need real devs. It just means insane people that are smart and do stupid things.
Yeah, I fit one of those or two of those criteria. I don't know about the smart part.
I do stupid
insane
things.
and fun.
I'm on my way. I'm on the list.
We've been going for a pretty long time. Before we wrap up, I kind of want to ask, like earlier we were talking about part of the blockchain producer's job is to build tools for Wax users and that sort of thing. And I was just curious if you guys have any like upcoming stuff you're working on and you wanted to share, or like
sneak
any
peeks
sneak
for
peeks
us.
we can get here.
What can we, the community of users, be excited about coming down the chain?
I got one. I don't think it's really like all that exciting or anything, but it's just a fun little thing I'm working on right now. I'm building a name service, like where if you own Neon, you could sell like .neon domains, but it's going to be a lot different than the existing stuff out there because those exist right now, but you could sell them for Wax basically. I'm building one where I'm building like blending mechanics into it and stuff, so you could have somebody craft like different NFTs based on like attributes or schemas and like different fungible tokens into like a name, and then like split the payments up between people and stuff like that. So it should be pretty interesting.
Oh, a name like a Web 2 kind of like name?
Like you could sell max.neon to someone if you own the Neon name. Or like
I do own the Neon name on the WAXP.
You would just list, you could just list Neon for like not Neon itself for sale. I guess I could do that too, but that's not really the point. But if you listed Neon, people would be able to buy names that end in .neon.
Got you. So I could make a blend, and if a community member from my Neon Space collection wants to make their own .neon wallet, I could be like, here's a blend. If you supply these ingredients, you can make a .neon wallet.
Exactly.
That's cool as shit. I own the .ftw extension too, and I'm always offering it to people, but no one ever takes me up. I mean, I'll give it away for free, so I'll be using that shit. That's cool.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool. It's gonna be cool.
So then they need to give which permissions to the contract?
So I'm going to set up that on the UI where they can just click a button if they want to, but it's going to be a link auth for the EOSAO new account or whatever it's called. It's just a permission to create a new account. But it's not going to give me permission to do anything else.
Yeah.
Oh, wasn't the anchor screaming at you about doing an unsafe action? Because I do that for the AW Butler drops. You add a custom permission, and oh my god, it was so painful. I like it because it protects some people, but man, to do these types of things, it made it so tough.
Yeah, I had to put I have like a token creator thing on WAXDAO where people they deploy a token contract to their account by just like clicking a button instead of having to learn how to deploy it themselves. And yeah, that comes up like every single time. Obviously, I have to have a whole FAQ that's like, first, you need to allow dangerous transactions in Anchor.
It is going to make you believe that you are getting hacked. I mean, and rightfully so. They try to warn you.
But also this permission, someone should know that it is a permission that could be salty. So you need to ensure that it's actually good, and you shouldn't use. If you use that account to store all your funds in the world, link off means that he can add permissions to other contracts for that. It is.
I told you, don't trust.
It's not the worst. It's not the worst permissions though. Update off is worse. Yeah.
Correct.
As far as there being similar services, I'm aware of a few services you can buy wallet names, custom names, but I'm not familiar of any services on Wax where I, with the owner of a specific wallet, can sell custom names.
I think that exists, but I know EOS Nation has one, but I don't see it.
I remember one at one time, but yeah, I don't remember where it was. May have even been on EOS.
It's just selling for Wax though. There's no like stuff. There's no blend mechanics involved in the.
So that blend can it be just any NFT as well?
Yeah, it can be. I have a bunch of different filters, so it could be by collection, schema, template, different attributes. Nice. You'll be able to accept different fungible tokens instead of just Wax. And you can do
let me burn these Enio slices and get a
that's cool as hell.
Do you want block one accounts, Michael?
B1, B1. I got some.
That's also more incentive for me to like go out and buy fun names on Wax. Like I bought FTW just as a vanity, like for the win. It's a gaming blockchain. I was like,
just so you know, to get one to go through, I think it's going to cost you, I don't know, it's like 700 Wax or something like that. Otherwise, you're just fiddling away in the never-ending queue of one a day stupidity.
I did that. I did one where I bid too low, and then I just bid the same name a second time, much higher, so I could get my fucking Wax back.
Push it through.
It's like fuck you. It was also like 2,000 Wax at the time because it was getting pricey. Yeah.
Above 675 looks like you'll be kind of actually in line to be getting something at the moment. So
do whatever you want, but make sure you're above worker.wax. He's gonna be like having an insane list of. I think he has like hundreds at 600 Wax.
Yes,
it's not Wax.
It depends on the name though. They're bidding basically on like trademark names most of the time. I actually got outbid on WAXDAO by them, and I think it was probably because it has the name Wax in it, so it just probably triggered something. They probably thought I was trying to pretend I was Wax.
I placed the first bid on. I tried to take Meta, and that was like right when Facebook announced they were changing the name. So right that day, I put a bid in for Meta, and then obviously, like I was doing well until Van stepped in, and Van just
Van.
I think Worker.wax outbid Van too, though.
Yeah.
When I got out,
people. It came in hot. I put
you
up
pretty
like
much can't outbid Worker.wax. Worker.wax will just
so
continuously outbid you if you try.
Yeah, that's why you just got to use the hack that I found. You just bid on something you know they're going to outbid you on, but it still has reason for being legit, and then you just hit them up and you're like, "You guys outbid me, bro," and then they're just like, "All right, I'll just give you that."
Oh, here you can have it back.
I didn't do that on purpose, obviously, but that's how it played out. I didn't end up having to pay for
it.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's how we had one. It wasn't on Wax. It was on another chain. It was one BP that was like getting something for the chain. And legit, the other BP was seriously getting in a bidding war over the same chain name to the point it was like, man, come on, that's a little sketch. Anders isn't on that chain. He wouldn't remember that. That one was funny. It was like, you legitimately are outbidding the network? Come on, you know I'm going to win.
That's funny. I do feel like some of those early name bids are very worth your while, like hearing from, especially from Kafer the other day, where like, you know, somebody who bought the name bid for the like the Qcoin deposit address name that was the same for
the typos, and
then people were just like cashing in.
Mine was
not
who by on EOS, because apparently the way I would spell who by isn't the way they spell who by. So, and the scam account has it. And like I said, I typed it in there one time, and I don't know, it was like $2,000 or something. It was painful enough. I was cussing very, very loud. They came to check on me. They came to check on me. Well, that's what it's like, you know, oh, you got to create a script. The funny thing was, that was me creating the script. So I didn't have to copy and paste it and screw it up. But when I created the script, I typed it instead of copying and paste it. And yeah, so the first time I did the script, actually.
And you did that for $2,000. Good try. Good test.
It wasn't a test. I was doing what I was supposed to do. I just never tested it beforehand because it's going to work.
That sounds like something you would do.
Yeah, it's going to work.
Good thing it was just the test amount.
You know what it was? It was my voter rewards. I sent my voter rewards on EOS to the wrong account. So I got zinged because obviously they didn't go away. They wanted their money. So I had to pay them again. But yes, that was my most painful mistake.
Yeah, tweeting at CZ isn't going to get very far, I think.
Might get you on a list with the SEC somewhere.
Yeah. Do it from a burner account.
Yeah,
Shout out
probably.
their new version of DAO is just launched on WAXDAO, which we use. We got the Neon Space DAO where you can vote on very important things like what artwork we turn into stickers next. Very big decisions, but
It's super cool. Like those tools are really fun. I like the idea of being able to like sell out like name wallet custom names for blends. I think that's a really cool tease for us for what's being worked
I don't
on.
know like quite how much demand there is for something like that, but I just think it's fun. Maybe it'll get people interacting with the names some more. And I guess a big part of the reason I'm justifying doing this for myself is because my original blended contract on WAXDAO is like a year old, and there's just so many things I would do differently. So I'm kind of using this. I'm going to be applying all this logic to move it over to a new blend contract as well. So there's going to be a new version 2 of the blends and drops coming out soon and stuff like that also.
Nice.
Yeah, because awesome. I don't know what's going on there. What is there, like 800 drops from the same person? Is that blends or whatever?
It's tokenized stone, wood, metal. It's some sort of like materials for a game or a crafting game or something. I don't know.
Oh,
There's a decent amount of blends on here though. I haven't really looked through this. Here's Byron stuff.
definitely.
Yeah, it's it would be getting more use if I like worked on the version 2 like I said I'm about to do now. So it's been a long time coming. There's just like a lot of features I didn't really add to this thing when I created it. And if anybody has written contracts on Wax before, you know how much of a pain in the ass it is to upgrade anything. I mean, you can't modify tables once there's like the indexes we were talking about.
The data and modify your table.
So it's either that you have to shut it down for a little bit, do a migration of table data, or what you see on a lot of contracts, like even with Nifty blocks, there's drop contracts and stuff like that, where they have features that they didn't have in the beginning. What they'll do is just create another table in addition to the
table, correct?
To go with it.
Account 2, EXT account. I mean, even some of the system contracts did the same thing.
So it's like you have the drops, a list of drops, and then you have another one called like drop proof, where it's like because they decided later, oh, we could whitelist people, but you can't add a new column, so you just have to add like a whole nother table now.
And like I say, that's another quirk that obviously anybody who's maintained their contract for a while, but you wouldn't think that if it allowed you to change the table of your contract, that would blow things up. And it doesn't blow things up as long as there's no data in it. But if there's data in it, it lets you do it, and then all hell breaks loose. And really, you almost have to undo back to the original table structure to delete the data. Then you can make the modifications and put it back in there. But like I say, I mean, it's kind of similar in the Web 2 world where, hey, it's hard to, you drop a table and whatever, but it tells you, no, you can't add a column. This one lets you add a column and just blow your shit up. So you almost gotta know some of these nuances of this the way this database Web3 kind of works versus just normal development. And I've seen countless people blow it up mid-release because they didn't want to get rid of the data because it was live, and they didn't realize they couldn't just add a column even though it let them.
The multiple tables is annoying, but it's also, I would consider it a feature in certain cases, because if you have a whole bunch of like records for, let's say you have something that's only applicable to certain records, like the whitelisting for drops, if not all of them are whitelisted, then you'd be loading all this unnecessary data if you had all the whitelist data in that same table, which would raise the CPU costs every single time.
What's the reason we have relational databases for the last 50 years is for that same reason, right? Is no, don't store it as an Excel spreadsheet with everything duplicated and whatever. Do it more effectively and just join it back whenever you need to. But like I say, you kind of got to know the right ways of doing it in smart contract world, you know, with the limited amount of indexing and framework you have. And then also, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't modify a table that has data in it, because it will absolutely tank your shit.
I've done it. Luckily, though, you can, like you said, you can revert it.
It's a relatively easy fix if you know how to fix it. But like I say, it goes, and then you got to, undo what it screwed up. But if you know, just go back to, just delete the column. You think that would break stuff? Nope, that's actually going to fix it, just like it never happened. Then you can do it. So anyway, I digress.
With how editable smart contracts are that are deployed on Wax, how mutable are the contracts that govern things like the liquidity pool on Alcor, or like a market
That's up to the contract owner ultimately.
Don't get me
you
started.
need to look at the permissions of that contract to see what they can do and how they can do it. Like take Atomic Assets contract, for example. If they want to update that, there is an MSIG between a few producers. They all need to agree on any update they do on that contract, so they can't do it themselves. So
that's great.
If they need to update the Atomic Asset contract, they need to go and talk to my team and a few others, and they need to explain why they need to update this and how they do it. And then we need to approve it on chain.
And then the only way for a contract that's been deployed on Wax, in my understanding, to be considered immutable would be if the permissions had no wallet attached to them anymore. Like if you've removed access to chains from anyone. Or
that's a interesting sticking point I've had with some developers coming from other chains. And yes, you can remove your permissions from the account, or assign it to the block producers, or even somebody that you don't, you throw away the key type of thing. But you also, one of the kind of fundamental mechanics of the way all Antelope chains work is that at the very core level of the chain, the validators have the ability to do, if enough are in agreement, they can push
15
and approve 15 of 21, 2/3 plus one. They can push through any action that they really want on almost any chain. Now, I think even on some of these chains where the developing team still maintains some control of the chain, even the team itself could do it. But there's this base level of, you can lock yourself out of the account, but it's almost impossible to guarantee absolute immutability, because there are still mechanics at the very L1 level that would allow somebody to change something. Unlike Ethereum, which does have true, when it's immutable forever. Now, there are some chains, not Wax, that UX, I think, has it, that are looking at bolting in some of these uplifts to have the mechanic of is immutable or not. And if is immutable, it doesn't have any rights from an overseeing lord. And you could look at it and say, that is what the contract will be for eternity, no matter what. because the core code won't allow it to be immutable. Now,
So make sure ChatGPT don't write that, right?
there you go, right? Now, again, if they change the core code and say, well, that bit doesn't matter anymore, you're right back to where you started. So it's not like it's truly immutable, but at the base level, I can tell you, I mean, there is no real level of immutability on WAX or EOS or TLOS or any
That
of these.
was that was my understanding. So I just wanted to make sure.
It's just very, very, very unlikely that anything would happen.
Correct. Now,
because I can let you know that doing an MSIG even for a legit upgrade of a contract for any of these chains is not fun.
That's true.
Yeah,
it's very hard to organize people, and if you want to organize them to do something malicious, then you need to have enough vote weight to get yourself in control of 15 top VPs. Or you need to convince 15 of them, which are distributed teams all over the world. They have different values, different opinions, to agree that this is something that we want to do.
On one chain, there was a VP that sent like a substantial chunk of rewards to the wrong account or something like that. And it was still in the account. And they could not convince the other VPs because it wasn't a bug. It wasn't a security vulnerability. And they're like, I'm sorry. I wouldn't do this for anybody else. I'm not going to do it for you. But they wouldn't even, most of them wouldn't sign the MSIG to even legitimate. We all knew it was
so they don't do it for their friend to save their friends. They're not going to do it for anyone else.
That's what I was saying. They wouldn't even do it on legitimate for a person they work with. And I'm like, and Anders is correct. I mean,
that is important not to do that though, because you'd be setting a precedent of not immutability.
That's why.
So that's also why it's important that the OIG are the right people, because they are pushing the guidelines for who, for what a guild should represent and who should be in guilds. And as long as you keep that quality high, then you have essentially no risk on things like this.
Yeah. And on the plus side of this concept, because again, like I'm a big fan, obviously, of like DeFi and immutability. I think does like true immutability does attract those multi-billion-dollar TVLs to those chains. But at the same time, the flip side of it on Wax, having that potential to be able to roll back something or adjust something, and not having that immutability also means that if exactly. If something were to be exploited, or if a Swan event, like it can be rolled back. That just, so that is.
That's how I tend to get away
take
from
Uniswap. No, Uniswap. Like, I got brain fart. The biggest NFT marketplace on Ethereum.
OpenSea or
OpenSea, exactly. When they migrated contracts, there was a lot of people getting scammed. That would not happen because they would just upgrade the current contract if they were on Wax, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And you could have unscammed those people.
That's what I say. I mean, I tend to not be a maximalist and be like, look, I get that immutable is great, but you know what's even worse? A known bug that nobody can fix, because that is absolute death. Or, you need to add something, right? It's been there for 10 years. No.
Yeah.
That's why I'm like,
or migrate to new contracts, and
correct.
that's not
That's why I don't depend as much on immutability. And
also, I could count on I don't think I have enough fingers on one hand to count how many times a migration clause in a contract was exploited and became the reason those things got rugged. Migrating is not simple,
On the topic of updating contracts and the liquidity thing that you mentioned, I can give you a situation where I can talk about actually both sides of that coin, because I was involved in that situation myself, and there were two contracts involved. It was the Alcor migration recently that happened when they migrated to version 2, and I'm not like salty. I'm not salty about it anymore. It is what it is.
Deleted everybody's tokens. There was
the way they did it was batshit like disconnected.
As they updated their contract, they erased everybody's balances from the first contract. But luckily, on the new contract, they moved over. It wasn't directly the same way, but they moved the balances over to where people's money was still there. So luckily, they were honest actors. But the point is that anybody can erase your balances if they have keys on the contract. The flip side to that was you know, people have asked me a few times throughout the last year since WAXDAO came out if I have keys on the contract, which I do. People had their LP tokens from Alcor version 1 staked at WAXDAO. And I had to create some special mechanics in order for people to be able to claim their money, even though technically it didn't exist anymore, because now it was migrated to version 2. So I had to write new code that allowed them to get their stuff from version 2, you know, in relation to what they should have had from version 1. And if I didn't have keys on the WAXDAO contract, I couldn't have fixed that problem. So that
on the flip
situation,
side, though, if Alcor didn't have keys to their own token contract, they wouldn't have broken it for you. So I get why they say, you know, you couldn't depend on the Alcor tokens being immutable. You had to a certain extent. You built on it, and then yes, they changed it, and then you ultimately had to be able to change yours. So I say it's a double-edged sword. I get why. I just tend to lean towards, look, nothing's right the first time ever. And nothing's right good after 5 years of existence. I mean, everything needs something. So, but yeah. I was amazed because I was ignorant. I mean, it's not as important to me. I'm not a DeFi guy. Finance isn't as important, I guess, right? But how many developers, especially coming from ETH and Solidity and all of that, were like, wait, I can't mark it as permanently immutable? I can't use this. None of my people will support it. Really?
Right. Yeah. It's definitely, I don't know. Like on the DeFi side of things, I do look for like immutable contracts or like, you know, deployed version. I don't know. I stick to Uniswap, you know, like you don't really need anything else. They've done it right the first time. That
at
V4
the very
model
least,
is
like
insane.
I do think how Atomic Assets is set up is at least a great step in the right direction. That's what I would like to migrate towards, at least with some of the future products, where multi-sig with multiple trusted parties and open source. Both of those combined together makes it. Even then, though, like the open source thing is another thing that's funny because if you don't know how to compile a contract yourself, open source is worthless. It means absolutely nothing because you can't look at the code on the blockchain. You can look at the WASM hash or whatever you call it, the WASM string, which is machine code that's compiled from the source code. If you don't know how to take the source code, compile it into machine code, and then compare that machine code with the machine code that's on the blockchain, the fact that you see a contract on the internet on GitHub means absolutely nothing because you don't know if that's the contract that's on the chain.
Yeah.
When it really comes down to it, that's true. It's very difficult, even at the block producer validation level, to be like, we got to jump through a lot of hoops to say, yes, what you proposed is this contract that uncompiled looks like this or decompiled.
It has to be compiled with this, like the same version of the software too, because
that's even more archaic. Is that depending on which version you use to compile it, you would get different hash results, which meant block producers were coming back and saying you're a nefarious actor because that is not the contract that you're deploying. Well, of course it is. No, I'm not bad. Why don't you? You can try the same thing 3 times and get 2 or 3 different results sometimes. It's amazing how finicky some of that validation process is. So yes, you're right, Mike. I mean, and I even tell them on a lot of chains is that, look, if you want every single one of your block producers, the 21 plus the standbys, to be code reviewers and understand it to the nth degree. Yeah, because it's not just understanding how to even compare a contract. Like it's system contracts, you have to understand every single mechanic of every single system contract to know how this might accidentally impact that. And
just because you wrote a contract doesn't mean you can audit one. There's a huge difference.
I mean, even most chains have this misconception that all block producers have that innate, just top level ability to manage the code, review the code. We all can compare hashes, but like I say, that's what I tell them is I'm like, look, I can confirm that it looks legit, but I couldn't tell you that it's about to crash some other mechanic because that's not what I do. That's not what most of us do. And if that is an expectation, some chains have had to, put that as a requirement and even compensate accordingly because that's not a $50 an hour person to do it or delegate it out to a subtask, a sub team that's more responsible for knowing the base code and also being able to kind of provide some additional oversight. to provide kind of a recommendation to the others that are looking and saying, look, I can confirm that's the code that's being deployed. And these 3 or 4 people that are smarter than me at the whole thing have confirmed, yes, it doesn't look like, you know, it's a slow mist audit or a sentinel audit or whatever. Not guaranteed 100%, but at least somebody who understands what the fuck they're talking about looked at it and said, yeah, there's no double spins. There's no integer overruns or whatever. Some of the, they didn't use ChatGPT to write this code.
Yeah. It's
I think Nick
definitely
makes
like
a good point here. He says auditing code is a double-edged sword. While I could do it, there can always be stuff that slips through, and you don't want to be on the hook for that. Which that's very true.
Yeah.
Hey,
That's
great
similar to,
news.
like,
All the auditing companies just give a disclaimer. They say, oh, no, we improved it, but you can't sue us when your shit gets hacked. We did our best effort.
Yeah.
Which I understand why, right? I mean,
yeah. Yeah, because how can you know, like, I don't know. At the end of the day, there's also like vulnerabilities that can develop over time as technology changes.
correct. It may
that just
not even be
you wouldn't
yours.
audit for today.
It may be
wouldn't even
like
know.
infrastructure level, like you talk about these
Exactly.
abilities to kind of down the line trick the system and front run. I mean, there's
Yeah.
some things in your code maybe you could do to try to prevent that, but yeah, a lot of this sometimes just nobody saw that coming, right?
Yeah.
Or like, you know, Mike, I mean, he got burned. It wasn't his contract that changed, but he got
Yeah,
the backlash
exactly.
from it. So, I mean, it wasn't.
That was also
same.
like objectively irresponsible, I would say, by like Alcor to release a token publicly to people, like the LP token, and then without like reaching out to anybody who may have built on top,
not
like
just a token. I mean, there were a lot of services we ran off of it. We ran liquidity reward pools and stuff that we would read the contract tables, see how many tokens they had, which ultimately told me what their, you know, LP participation was, and then be able to do things off of that information. So yeah, he got beat pretty hard. I know that they said, I think they gave a couple days warning, but and Avril's a good guy. I've talked to him many a times over the years, and he tries. But yeah, that one was a faux pas that a lot of people got mad, and a lot of people got burned hard. Mike, you got burned. The koalas, I think they got burned pretty hard. It broke some of their shit that they wrote on it.
That took me a long time to sort out, man. Like, yeah, like you said, Avril's a nice guy. He helped me sort it out, so I don't want to be too rough on him. But like,
if it weren't for Alcor, I mean, I don't think any of our ecosystem would truly be where it is today, right? I mean, that's
I agree with that.
That's the thing,
really
though.
Appreciate stablecoin liquidity and being able to bridge stuff from EOS.
The IBC stuff on Alcor fucks.
I mean, once he embraced it. He embraced the first IBC that Boz wrote, and then got burned by it, and then came back for this new Antelope IBC. But huge on developing the ecosystem. That's why it was so painful for me to see. Is ooh, damn, people are really mad at him, and they've got a really good reason.
Yeah,
I feel bad because. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I was just saying the IBC stuff like unifies the liquidity that exists on like, you know, EOS and Wax, and like I love Wax, but like I can't, you know, buy $1,000 worth of Wax on chain. Realistically,
I can't do shit as an American anymore. All of the exchanges that support it now have KYC, and I'm like, shut
and
down.
now I can I can still get my EOS on like Coinbase or something, and I can then IBC Coinbase, that, and that I feel like that the unification of like the liquidity available on those EOSIO chains, that's a huge step forward.
Hey, that's Antelope, really bro. Antelope.
That's right.
Antelope. I'm really excited for. I'm so stoked to start getting some like
get into too much of a tangent. We should wrap this up.
Yeah, probably.
We go for over 2 hours.
We can nerd out.
You guys are all busy.
It's midnight here.
We got an evaluation coming up in 4 days. I got work to get done.
That's true.
Okay. Thank you guys. This was fucking fascinating. So thanks for joining us, and thanks everybody who watched too.
It was a nice chat.
Happy to do it again. Talk about whatever you want. AMAs. That's what I say. I love to just chat.
Yeah. I love this. This is like very, I don't know. I mean, I'm a big fan of this topic anyway, but I feel like I think there's a lot of people within like the Wax community on the user end that have misconceptions about how the guilds work, about how the like, you know, who's behind this stuff. And it feels like maybe a conspiracy and collusion and all these like, you know, channels of misinformation. So I love having people having you directly on, and the community being able to see hey, these are real people. We can see Michael and Anders just like disagreeing on fucking everything. They're clearly not like colluding. So
We do
I
not
really
run the same
love
nodes.
that.
You can promise that.
Yeah, they're not running the same node out of the same. It's not the same operation. Like, so it's really great to see that. But also the topics we covered. God, this was great. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, definitely love to do it again. I've never felt dumber than when you guys were talking about the tech stuff. I was just like, I'm understanding about 30% of this, so I feel like I could definitely use more
Well,
more
we
time
were
in the room with you
trying.
guys.
We were
It's
trying
harder.
to ELI5 it, and that was what it came out as. So.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, to us, it's just pure matrix, symbols falling in our head. I mean, it doesn't even, form a solid entity. It's just.
I don't even see the code. It's just blonde, brunette.
It's funny because actually, if you watch one of our nodes, and you actually see it, because it's just constant scrolling of all this. I joke about is that it's just like looking at the matrix because it's going by so fast you can't really read it. But Anders and Mike know this is that if you look at the right spot and you kind of get a bearing on it, I can stare at that screen and tell you 15 different pieces of information that are scrolling by. When you look at it and it truly looks like just this monstrous log going by.
You can't do that on a push transaction now, though.
I do. I just change the logging, but like to tell where it is, how far it's behind, what may be going on, different things like that. It's scrolling by so fast, but if you know where to look, who the block producer signing the block was. Is it your turn or not yet? And you can sit there and stare at it. Normal people just look and they're like, I can't see the woman in the red dress. All I see is just code flying by.
Yeah, man, that's great. It's like what on movies, what hackers are doing, what their screen is doing is pretty much what it looks like, which is
exactly.
Yes, except for almost, at least on theirs, it looks like lines of code that have like proper indenting, so it looks, kind of like code. This is truly just wide as the page, rolling 15-line logs, just.
I sent a quick screenshot to Louis of just one page, but it's readable.
Okay,
just content.
We got to end on the screenshot.
But this is like as readable and simple as the log can get, pretty much. By still having the information you need.
I'm still having
fun.
Why
I do a Telegram message to my URL in my browser? Is that possible? I guess I can save it.
I'm still having fun with the way Lewis set up the windows in Windows and Windows and Windows.
Yeah.
I can't quickly show that on my screen without changing my screen share, but it's just a bunch of numbers and letters.
But it looks like in the right spot, and that's scrolling by, a page at a time. But if you know where to look, what those pieces of information you're looking for on there. But that's the closest I can say that it's like watching the Matrix. And I mean, I've got 4 27-inch monitors here. So whenever somebody walks in and sees that just scrolling down on all my screens, they're just like, oh my God, what are you doing? Anyway, they accuse me of things that aren't true.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you to the audience. We'll hopefully be able to do this again. So think of questions for next time. And we're going to raid into NFT Gamer TV. I believe they're doing something with Novo Pangea right now, which is a wax game. And our next stream will be on Thursday at 2:30 p.m. Pacific time, which we'll be doing our other tech talk. We normally do Wax DeFi and market analysis on Tuesdays, but we're going to push that to Thursday. So if you're interested in that, consider following, and we'll see you then. But otherwise, have a good day, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks. It was fun being here.
Look forward to the next time.
Yeah, man.
All right. Peace out, everybody.
Peace out.
Yeah. Rated over. Taco.
And then I'm going to